Joe is a bat biologist who's based in Asia, and he's primarily kind of fallen into several different disciplines, including conservation ecology, community ecology, but also really exciting as well in the mix is bioacoustics of bats. And Joe is originally from Taiwan, which is a small island in East Asia. And Joe is focused sort of mainly, his work has been around Southeast Asia. He's been involved, and you're going to be very jealous of this, in projects in Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, China, as well as Taiwan. He's also serving on the committee and is a board member of several conservation NGOs, including the Southeast Asian Bat Conservation Research Unit, which I'd also highly recommend you follow, the Association of Taiwan, and also he was on the panel for Human Dimensions and the Bat Trade Working Group under the IUCN Specialist Group. He's currently working very closely with Tomas Olof from the Hungarian Natural History Museum and other partners from all over the world, managing the world's largest public call library. So I will pop a link to this in the chat as well, but without further ado, I'm really delighted to have Joe join us, and acoustics is such a big area for all of us. So thank you very much, Joe, for joining.
Can everyone see the slides?
Not yet.
Not yet, okay. Let's just start, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. So bye everyone. The end of talk. No, it's just from the movie. So it's really my privilege to have this great opportunity to present the kind of vast team sharing with the partners of Bats Without Borders and all these participants from all over the world. So I see some old friends, a lot of new friends, so I'm really excited. So first, I really like to thank Rachel for this very nice introduction and invitation. So this is the work not done by one person, but a group of people. So if you notice, I changed the subtitle a little bit. So originally I mentioned I talk about toward global code library, but we changed the subtitle to toward a global network of bat code libraries. So my talk will not too much deviate from the original design, but we are going to introduce you the new idea by the end.
Oh, sorry to interrupt, Joe. I think if you want to just try sharing again, your slides haven't started for us.
So you didn't see my slide yet?
No, not yet.
Okay, share again, yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
It's fine. How about now?
Yes, now we can see them. Thank you.
Okay. So before I start the talk, I really want to acknowledge all my founding the agencies, particularly the GBIF and also the European Union and NSF of the United States, and also the MOST in Taiwan. So without these founding agencies, I don't think we can finish this project. I would also like all my collaborators, particularly Dr. Gabo Troba and Thomas Goldford and Tia Kingston from Hungarian and also United States. So they are the key players in these projects, and all these partners from Southeast Asia and Taiwan. Without their contribution, we are not be able to achieve so much. And let me to talk with you guys here today. So I guess Rachel already talked about my research a lot. So if you know me, you know people call me Uncle Joe in South Asia. So my primary research institute focus on bats, of course, and I'm doing a lot of conservation biology, education outreach in the community ecology in Southeast Asia, tropics, and recently I have a transition in my research from pure field worker to bioacoustics. So this is what I am now. So I primarily focus on bats in South Asia, which host nearly 400 bat species with some very wonderful species, including Carivola picta, the planetary bat, and also Carivola hardwicki. in the slides. So in the recent, because of COVID, I stuck in Taiwan. So my recent research focus in Taiwan, but I'm ready to come back to South Asia in the next year. So I've been working on bats in Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, and the Philippines and Taiwan. So before I move to the Chirovax, I just want to talk about my research a little bit and show you the story how I moved from the field work to bioacoustic for now. So I did my PhD in Sumatra, Indonesia. At that time, I focused on bat diversity and conservation in the coffee and the forest landscape. So the primary question is to look at how the coffee agriculture affects and change the bat diversity in this region. So I did a lot of these traditional trapping techniques, including hard traps and also mist netting, which you guys should be familiar with. So with this technology, it's really exciting is we demonstrate a new bat hotspot in southwestern Sumatra. So we documented at least 67 species in this region, and also with a few new species. And we described one of the species in 2014. So that's the Briscopus aquilus. So it's a small insectivorous with a pad on the elbow and also the hind feet, living inside the bamboo stem segments. So these are great, and this is wonderful. I feel excited and satisfied when I did finish the field work. But one issue is we also know that there are a lot of bats. They fly very high in the sky beyond the trap and the mist net level. So in South Asia, we have very similar diversity of these open space species in the family level with Africa. So most of these open space species belong to Monosteidae, Imbarneridae, Miniopteridae, and also the large species in the Vesperlionidae, mostly in the subfamily of Vesperlioninae. This is some species from South Asia. So at that time, every time when I trapped in the field, I look at the sky, I hear the sound from some low frequency Monosteidae, and I look at the detector on my hand. I know there are a lot of bats. They flew there and never went to the hard trap and mist nets. So there is a missing parcel of the bat diversity in my study, which is the species fly very high. So I guess everyone here, you are bat biologists, you know that acoustic represent cause and effect tools to study echolocating bats, particularly for these bats fly in open space species. So the concept and the idea is you have the detector in your hand, especially for nowadays. We have this very nice, delicate, small ultrasonic microphone. We can implant these devices on the smartphone or your iPad. So you go to the field, you turn on your cell phone, you insert the microphone. So you're expecting, you can see the program can show you what species might flew and make sound in front of you. But this is just an ideal story. This is only possible in part of the world, which mostly in the Europe and North America and part of Africa, and maybe a part of the Latin America, and in Asia or in the most tropical area. We know this is not ready yet. So okay, fine. So we don't have this fancy automatic classifier in the smartphone, but at least maybe we can do something with the recording when we back to the lab. So we put the recording in the computer. We open this recording, look at the sonogram, and maybe we can figure out what species we might have had in the field. So that was the idea when I was doing my PhD in Sumatra. So Tika said, "Oh, Joe, you should." My supervisor Tika. So she said, "Joe, you should bring a detector to a field, and you should bring tons of recording back from Sumatra. And later you can figure out what species fly beyond the traps." So I didn't know too much about the situation in South Asia, including Indonesia and Sumatra Islands. So I had one SM2 recorder, so I bring it to Sumatra, set up in the field, in the forest, and in the plantation. I got recordings and back. So then I asked Tika, so where are the reference code, where are the code library, or where are the acoustic identifier key that I can use to identify at least some species in recording? And Tika looked at me. So there's no such material in South Asia. You have to figure out by yourself. So I had some recording from field, and I also went to the Google Scholar. I searched in the database. I found, yes, there are a lot of published data describing the echolocation code of these open space species in South Asia. But although they are not from Indonesia, not from Sumatra, they are mainly from the Indo-China Peninsula, but we share a lot of species in Sumatra and also with these countries in peninsula. So I look at this literature, I think also great. They really show us how the sound of bats of different species look in the sonogram. They also provide a lot of these measurements of this spatial, spectral and the temporal feature of the sound. So at that moment, the first time when I read this literature, I look at my screen, I open all this sound recording, I think, okay, I feel I can finish this project. I can see the end of my PhD. I feel I can graduate at that time. But I won't tell you the end of story, even until now. Like 7 years after my PhD, I haven't finished the analysis of the recording from Sumatra. So there are several restrictions of the published data in that applying to the recording I got from the field. So the first is most of the literature, they only provide the summarized data of the measurements of the recording. I believe everyone knows this very well. So people usually present the data in mean with standard deviation and or standard error. Sometimes people provide the range of different measurements. So this might be useful for some of bats in the recording. For example, the Ipsiderus and the Rhinolophus, they have a very minor variation in their frequency of the CF components. But this is least useful for the species that use a frequency modulated core, which is applied to all these open spaces. So there are no geographic variation of bats in South Asia. So there is one paper by Isavam from Cambodia. He studied the echolocation code of one Rhinolophus bats that's very common in Indochina and also Indo-Malay islands is Rhinolophus affinis. So if you look at this figure on the right, you can the number on the map indicates the peak frequency of the CF component of the different population of one species in South Asia. So you can see a huge variation of the echolocation code frequency from 65 to 85 for the same species. So there is a potential risk that we use the reference code or this description of echolocation code from other countries, from different regions. Even your study site not far from there's other people's study site, there's some potential that we might experience unknown geographic covariation. And this is not just one species case, it's a case for many species across different families in South Asia. So another limit is a lot of people, they have a very limited sample size in their paper. So this is critical, not critical for CF bats, but critical for the frequency modulated echolocation code, because if you only have a very small sample size, you easily underestimate the intraspecific variation of echolocation code features for one species. And this is the case for most open space species, because people usually capture very few number of this kind of bats in the field. And in most cases, because the taxonomy study in South Asia or in the tropics are usually very behind, we have been publishing more than 20 new species and some new genera from South Asia in the past 2 decades. So there are a lot of taxonomic uncertainties. So people in South Asia, when they get these open space species, they usually seldom release the bats. They usually sacrifice these bats as virtual specimen. And for this matter, people usually record in the reference code of open space species in confined area. For example, the flight tent or the room inside the hotel. And this really affects how the bats make echolocation call if you put this open space species in small space. And so we got the small sample size, we got a typical call from the open space species that people present in these publications. So there are a lot of restrictions that we don't know how to use this literature to identify species in the field. So what can we do? So I'll give you one example is if you try to review the published data in the literature for your study in the region. So what will happen? So I did these interesting projects with my cooperator and colleagues from Spain and also China. We review all the publication of the bats we know in China continent. So we review like over 50 publication for 90% of the non-species, echolocated species in China. So we build up acoustic key based upon the literature. So what we get, you can see is just some examples we experienced in this review paper is, you can see because people only provide mostly the mean and the standard deviation, the data. So with this list information data, when we build up the code classifier, these keys, we have to group multiple species into one code group. This is very common when we doing this review paper. And this is what happened when I tried to review the literature for my study in Sumatra. I got a very similar results that it's so difficult for people, at least for myself, to use this published data, try to identify this open space species or this age species in Sumatra. So all this experience tell us is, if we really want to compare our data to have more accurate and precise species identification for our acoustic recordings, we need the raw data, which means we need people to share the original recording of the reference code. And I believe everyone today, you know, this is something very rare and very strange thing to me. So it's really weird. We have a lot of people publish papers describing echolocation code and social code of so many different species from so many regions and countries. If you do the Google Scholar, you search, you can find tons of the data, but there are so few of these original recording are published in a public code library and allow people to download and compare. So I think this really stopped the development of bioacoustic for bats at this moment, especially that so many people can get the recorders now. So acoustic tools, including the software and also the hardware, are relatively cheaper than 20, 30 years ago. So there are more people have these devices. People go to the field, they got recordings. They tell people we got we record some species from Indonesia, we got another species from Malaysia. Some people describe echolocation code, but there is no reference code actually let people to download and compare. So I guess at least for Southeast Asia, there are several reasons why people don't want or don't have desire to share this recording. So the culture in South Asia is really conservative, and I think this is caused by many issues. I'm not a social scientist, so I cannot explain why, but I guess the very fragmented landscape in South Asia really reduce the opportunities for people from different regions and different countries to communicate and exchange experience and also data. So the very diverse language in South Asia are different from the other tropical region. Like in Africa, you have 3 languages. And in Latin America, basically, there is 1.5 language. People only speak Spanish and Portuguese in Latin America. it's very different in South Asia. If you go to one country, they have one or two very dominant language, and every countries in South Asia speaking different language. So even when people meet in a conference, or people when travel to meet the other best scientists in the meetings, they want to share the experience. There is a language barrier for people in South Asia or in Asia in general. The colonial history in South Asia also make a lot of people in this region hesitate to share data with foreigners, particularly people from East Asia and Europe. I don't want to interpret that too much, but that's my experience is people really conservative when they see a Chinese appearance, people try to approach them and talk about data sharing, talking about the cooperation in doing research in this region. I guess it's really probably a universal problems in all of those topics, but I feel in Asia, these issues are really extreme. And also the very limited incomes in for most Southeast Asia biologists, except people from Singapore and Brunei, make the biologists hesitate to share their recordings with other people. I just give you one example. So if you have this your own co-library, and people, when the foreign country, for example, when the wind energy company, they are looking for people who can do the environment impact assessment for bats. So the first thing people think about in their minds is acoustic monitoring. So if you go to Vietnam, ask people who has the recording, there's only handful of people's name. People know that they might have some co-library collection in their computer. So the foreign companies, they have no choice but can only go to these people. This is a very sensitive issue in South Asia, because when you talk about the data sharing, including the specimen sharing, including the echolocation recording sharing, some people sometimes, even people understand there are some benefits that if they share their findings, their raw data with people, they still don't want, because it's all, if you own the data, if you own the recordings, it's more or less guarantee your future funding. And if you are staying your original from a poor country, I think this becomes a big issue. I'm not going to mention any name of the country have this issue, but I think it's quite general for many South Asia countries. At last, even the younger generation nowadays, they have this much open minds than the older generation in the country. They don't have the concept of open database. So this is the barriers that when we start talking about data sharing, including the co-library in South Asia, we identify all these obstacles that might stop the data mobilization in South Asia. So I think that's my personal opinion. So how can we break these barriers? So in my mind, I think if you're doing conservation, you probably also have the same thoughts. It's only people, only human can solve the problem caused by human. So what we do is since 2011, we had this loose NGO named South Asia Bat Conservation Research Unit. So it's founded by Dr. Kingston from Texas Tech University. I think most people know her very well. So we have the civic crew since 2011, and we had the regular meetings with a rep from different countries and different NGO all over South Asia every year. And every 3 or 4 years, we had one regional conference for people working in Asia and South Asia to attend, to talk about, to share our finding and research in South Asia and the adjacent regions. So we did this since 2011, and I guess we were very successful. We really built a very strong network and friendship between the people from different countries in this region. So back to 2018, we had this 4th Civico meeting in the Philippines. And in addition to all these fantastic talks and also the field trip during the meeting, we really had one major task we have to finish during this conference. It's the reassessment of the overall bat IUCN Red List. In this case, we're doing this for Asia. So it was led by Dave Walden and Neil Furry, these two people. So we had a lot of people, all the experts from different countries in Asia sit in the same room. We look at all the data we have and we try to figure out the conservation status of every known bat species in the region for IUCN. So at that time, everyone figured out a big problem is, even we have so many capture data, people report so many inventory study data, new records, extension of distribution, new species from South Asia and from Asia. There are very little proportion of this data, the raw data, including the coordinates and the dates, all these very basic information of species occurring that are necessary for us to estimate the species population trend and the distribution range of the species. They are not accessible. Most data, even those published data, they are not accessible. So we really got a hard time to do proper assessments for many, many bat species in South Asia, and also East Asia, even for those most common species in these regions. So this is the big issue for us. We identified as the biggest challenge at that time. We have data, people have data, but these data are not, most of these data are not accessible. So I gave you one index to show how little data we have in the public database for bats from South Asia. So if you know GBIF, the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, they have this huge database of species occurrence for all the species known globally. So if you look at the global data, so we have roughly 1,430 species in the world. And in South Asia, we have roughly 400 bat species. So the Southeast Asia contribute more than a quarter of the non-bat diversity in the world. But if you look at the data in GBIF, the data from South Asia only contribute 2.3% of the global data in GBIF database. So there is very limited data of Asian bats in the public database, particularly in the tropics. So we identify this is a big issue, and everyone who sit in that room in that afternoon, including all these reps from different South Asian countries, everyone accept and recognize that's the challenge and something we have to overcome. So this is the beginning of CareVox. Okay, I have a very long introduction, but I think that's relevant for us for people to understand how we can overcome all these obstacles to persuasive people to get out some of the data recording they have in the computer and throw the data and share via CareVox. That's the beginning, that's the line of the story. So we have, after that afternoon, everyone feel upset. So in the next day during lunchtime, so I sit with Tiga and Gabo and also Neil Furry and probably also Kai Armstrong from Australia. So we have this beer lunch and we talk about the issue we encountered during the IUCN release assessment yesterday. And starting Gabo Troba just threw a question. She said, everyone, we had a new project funded by Hungarian government. We have money to make a public open call library for Asian bats. Do you want to do this together? So everyone said yes, but no one have time. So at that time, I remember, because I'm the youngest scientist in this table, so I guess because of beer, I know it's because of beers from people, or because I was young at that time. So it's my third year after my PhD, I received my PhD degree. So I look at everyone, including Gabo, say, okay, I'm happy to do this for everyone. So this is the beginning of the CareVox. So in the next year, I just figured out, because in that IUCN release assessment sessions, everyone in the civic crew, everyone from South Asia, they agreed that they have to share this data. So I grabbed this opportunity. So I talked with the GBIF Asia, and they have this biodiversity information fund for Asia. So they give money to people in Asia to facilitate the data mobilization to GBIF database. So I submit a proposal with Tiga and Gabo and Thomas to GBIF, and we got the project. So the project, the entitled is deploying acoustic data to fill gaps in bed diverse information for South Asia. So if you only look at the title of the project, you will think we're only going to collect the data of species occurrence from people in South Asia. So if you're interested in the detail of the project, you can scan this barcode here. So the idea is we have this long-term investor network civic crew in South Asia. So we have been working with Hungarian Natural History Museum and also Harris Institute, with many South Asian country people from not just South Asia, but also South Asia and East Asia. So we have this solid relationship embedded in this network. So the idea is we already invest more than a decade to this region. And now we have a good feeling of the network. People are friendly to each other. People are very keen to share their knowledge and the information during all the meetings in the past decades. So maybe that's the chance we can see if people are willing to get their data out from their hard disk and share and contribute to the public database, including the core library. So the project architecture, the idea is very simple. We tell people that we have this identified issue of species across data, and we need people to get out this species information across data for the next IUCN Red List assessment, which is about 10 years ago, back to that time. But at the same time, we had a very exciting news from Hungarian Natural History Museum. They got money for an open core library. So we talked with the people in civic crew and all our cooperators. If we use a chance to build up a core library specifically for South Asia or for Asia, we give a name of a core library as Asian Bed Code Database. So we only need everyone to get out very small proportion of your collection of a reference code in your computer, maybe 5%, maybe 10%. And we compile all this recording together, then we can have the first core library for Asian bats. In addition, beyond this point, we also can extract the species across data from this recording and reformat clean the data following the format, the Darwin core format, and submit to GBIF database. So this idea is very simple, but a lot works to do. But surprisingly, is most of our partners in South Asia that accept this. I think that afternoon when people feel upset and in the room when people are doing this IUCN Red List assessment, people feel panic because they didn't expect the data that they can access are so few, so limited, and they know some species are common, they know some species are threatened, but we don't have data to prove this real conservation status for this species we care. So this is really good timing for us to go through everything this and remind them again and again, you need to get the data out. So why we don't do these two projects together? You get out some of your recording in the computer at the same time. We share the species across data attached to this recording and reformat and submit to GBIF. So this is the project architecture. For the core library architecture, it's much simpler. We have this data collected from BIVA project. We have the recording that Hungarian Natural History Museum collect from all over the world in the past 3 decades. We also have data from outside the 2 projects. So we compare everything, we format the metadata of the recording designed for the ChiroVox. So suddenly the name ChiroVox come out because in the middle of the project, Gabo and Thomas, they figure out we actually collect data much more than we expect at the beginning of the project. So they talk with me and the Tiga say, why not we have a global database for bats and make it public? So we changed the database name from ABCD to ChiroVox database. So we have the database and the Hungarian Natural History Museum, they built up a website as a platform for us to share all this data. So we have the standard data sheet for the metadata of all the recordings. I'm not going to go through everything. So most of these data sheets, the fields either follow the Darwin code for GBIF data or following the Guano format that designed for most bad acoustic software and the hardware. We have this data sharing policy for every contributor to function like a contract between ABCD, between CareVox and the data contributor. So I think the most important thing in this data sharing release form, in this data sharing policy, we have the options for the license that people want to attach with the recording they share with the publics. So we provide different CC license options for people, okay? And we also provide the option that the people can choose to share the recording, but with certain time lags. Because a lot of people, when we talk with them, are you willing to share your recording or part of your collection with the public? They say they want, but they haven't published the data. So we hear this sound and a lot of people say these stories to us. So we put this option for people. So we have these options is you share your data, but with this after we don't open this recording to publics until certain years. So I guess this very flexible license option really make people open their mind, and they know their data will be safe. They know they will get their credits if they have this license to protect their authorship. And they know they can share the data, but with some time lags, which allow them to have time to publish their paper. And this also becomes a motivation to people, because some people say, I need motivation. That's a good idea. That's a good option. So a lot of people choose these options. So they share the data with CareVox, but with maybe 2 to 5 years lags. Okay. So this is a lot of new concept and new idea to people in South Asia and in Asia in general. So since 2008 until 2020, we make several workshops and webinar to teach people how to do the formatting, how to share your data with GBIF, and how to share your data with CareVox, and what's the benefits you can get. So people start learning all these new concepts and new skill, especially the young people. They are really willing to share their data. So by the end, by around 1.5 years, we got a lot of good feedbacks. So we collect about 3,900 recording of roughly 200 best species from 10 countries. By 21 research teams. At the same time, we collect more than 18,000 species data from people. So we actually collect, the reason we collect more species data than echolocation code, because some people say, Joe, I have a species data more than the recording. Do you want to take it or not? Some people told me, say, Joe, we have only the species data, but we don't have recording. Do you want to take the data or not? So I told them, say, I take them all. So these 18,000 species occurrence data is contribute to more than 300% to the GB data for the 2000 and 2019. So we 4 times the species data of bats for Asia for this period in GBIF data by one small project with very little funding. Okay, so this is achievement. If you compare the recording we collect during the projects with some of the well-known core library in the world. So you can see in terms of the species diversity, in terms of the number of core and also the geographic extension and also the accessible, the CareVox lead on the board for most categories. So this is, we look at data, so this data make us very confident say CareVox is the largest public bad code library in the world right now. So we have this website, we call CareVox website, the bad code library. So you can scan this barcode to access the website now. We have the people serving the steering committee, including Gabo Trobo, Thomas Gofor, Sandon Zabuk, and Tika Kingston, and also other people. So all experts from Asia and Europe. So this is the data we have had now in the database. So we have the data mostly from Asia, some from Europe, and some from Mid East, and a few from Africa and Latin America. So currently you have almost 4,000 recordings of 228 bats belong to 47 genera and 10 families. And it's contributed by people from 10 countries, and there are 47 people contributed data by now. So a little more about the website. So if you go to the website, we have the introduction page, and we also have the about page that we talk about the project, we talk about the committee, we talk about the goal of the core library, and more importantly is if you go to the sound library, you can see the stats of the collection, and you can browse the recording by species name, by country's name, by contributor, and also by CURVAS universal ID. We also have put some publication correlate to this echolocation code in the core library, and also some resources, for example, information, hardware and software. So if you go to the sound library, search by the countries. So on the left, you can see the nation list. So for example, I choose Taiwan. So on the right, they will generate a new table, show you all the recordings from Taiwan, and including the information species, the countries, the recording method, and the type of recorder, and also the UID. If you click the details with the UID in the details column, you can see all the metadata associated with the recording. Okay, on the end of the metadata, you can see the sound. There's option for you to download the sound. So you can right click your mouse and save the link. You can get a recording, or you can just click the link. So they will jump a new window and replay the sound in time spacing of 10. So you can online, real time, hear the sound of the recording. And you can also download the recording by click the tab on the right. And that's it. It's very simple. Except those people, except the recording that people choose to release after certain years, you can download everything from the core library without any restrictions. Okay, so we achieved so much. So what can CURVAS can help us in South Asia? So just give you one example. So I work with some people from Taiwan, also Malaysia, in Borneo. So we set up the recording in one national park, the Gunung Mulu National Park. So in this national park, we have the largest cave, bat cave in South Asia, which named Deer Cave. In this cave, we have about 2 million free-tailed bats and also another 14 bat species. So it's the largest bat caves in South Asia. We started this soundscape project since 2018. And in 2019, we saw this very interesting behavior. We saw a water bat flying in the day, from early morning until evening. Even during the lunchtime at noon, you see the bats flying above the river and the small stream all the time, everywhere inside this national park. Okay, so we go back to look at the recording. So we look as part of data. So we have this long-term spectrogram tool can generate the spectrogram of multiple recording into one sonograph. So you can, if you look at this sonogram on the x-axis, this is time of the day. On the y-axis, that's the frequency. You can see in the day, from the morning, 6 in the morning until noon, you can see there are certain things, something happened here. Okay, even in the morning, and we go through all the recording manually, we found that's bats. So we have at least 4 bat species active in the day. In every month through a year, from 7 in the morning until 6 p.m., we have bat activity in the day all the time. So this is really interesting, but we are not being able to finish this project because we cannot finish all the sound analysis of this very long-term recording. We're recording the sound 1 minute per 6 minutes, 24 hours per day. And we do this since 2018, for every day since 2018 until now, we're still doing this. We spend 1 year, we only can finish the data of half of 1 year data. So like 10% of the data. So what can we do? We really want to figure out the pattern of the diurnal activity of bats in this area. We really want to analyze all the data we collect for long term. So we have another project. We work with the students from UK and a scholar from Singapore and UK. So we use the data from ChiralVox to build up the first automatic code classifier for Borneo bats. And that's the exciting time, because for the next step, we're going to use classifier to analyze all the recording we collect in the last 4 years. Okay, so without the people open their mind to contribute to the code library, we will not be able to do this right now. We published this code library in early this year on PLJ. You scan here, you can download the paper. It's open access. We put all the data contributors to the paper. Okay, you share something, you got something. And after we publish this paper, we have a bottom-up effect. We got a lot of people, individuals contact us, say they want to share their collection from all over the world, including Africa, South Asia, Neotropics, and Europe and North America. Only this part of people who want to contribute data here. Okay, so what's the next? This is the second last slides. So at the beginning, I mentioned a global network of backhoe library. So when I talked with Tiga in the meeting a month ago, so Tiga asked me and Thomas, are you guys want to make a code library for global user? And I said no, because it's too difficult. Every region have your own issues. Every region, you have your challenges. And for people working in South Asia, for people working in Europe, we don't know how to deal with issue in other regions. We also have the taxonomist in the project when we're doing the ChiralVox project. We have the expert from the Hungarian Natural History Museum to identify every species name of every data in the database. But we have knowledge to do this for the global bat diversity. So I propose to Tiga, say, instead of doing a global code library, how we do a global network of bat code library? We work with all these state code libraries for bats in the world, and also the NGOs for bat conservation research in different regions of the world. We form a network. To do this together, we can have the standard metadata for every code libraries in the world. We can have the platform set up to provide the integrated catalog of the global collection, okay, compiling the data information from different code library, real time, and all the information resources are shared through this global network platform. I think this is really exciting opportunity for us to move on beyond Southeast Asia, beyond ChiralVox. So I never want to make a global code library, but I think a global network will be interesting. So it's just like the Bats Without Border. People from Africa, you from different regions and different countries work together without border. So last sentence is just a very simple conclusion. If there is no boundaries for the bats, so be the data sharing in science. If you love bats, share recording with a big family. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very, very much. And so, yeah, please do get in touch with Joe, and there's the details there. I have put the link in the chat as well to have a look at the website. I must admit, it's an incredibly challenging area, acoustics anyway, and I think Asia has such diversity. So you've got a lot of work that you've been doing. It's really very inspiring. So if anybody has any questions, you can pop that in the chat, or if you would like to put your hand up. So yeah, we've got a congratulations. I guess so. Maybe I'll kick off with a question. I'll just kick off with a quick question. So I suppose, how would you ensure the sort of data quality? I think that's something, quite a lot of us struggle with a bit, is actually getting good enough calls for a call library. Do you have any advice on how to get good recordings?
Are you asking the quality of the recording or the quality of the call library?
Yeah, the quality of the actual call. So I suppose, with having, maybe like, some researchers have been using, kind of flight cages. Some people do release calls. So I guess how do you have any advice on what kind of quality, I suppose, of the calls you would be ideally looking for?
I think that's a very interesting question, because at the beginning of the project, we have a debate of the data quality. So some people suggest we should only collect good quality recording. So, in some cases, people don't really have choice, or they don't have the knowledge how to record reference code properly. Sometimes they don't have choice. For example, you got a new species. Of course, you cannot release the bat. You need to keep the bat as a virtual specimen. So the only choice is you try to record some sound from the bats. You put the bats on the hand, and hopefully that's a CF bat. But if not, if it is a FM bat, you have to set up a flight tent, or you put the bat in the room. And you got the recording that probably atypical to what they actually use in the field. I got a lot of echo, a lot of these noises from the air condition or the people. On the other hand, some people say we shouldn't do this because we just start. So the most important thing is not to set up a high standard at this stage. We need people to understand and get used to data sharing. We want people to understand the benefits of data sharing. We want people to have implant this concept, make them feel safe, make them feel happy to take out the data from their computer and hard disks and share with people. So to be frankly, it's most data contributors of the projects. In average, people probably only take out their maybe 15% of their collection. There are a lot more in people's disk. So back to the question is, instead to control the quality of recording for the chiral works, for this pioneering stage, we encourage people to contribute any recordings, as long as there's a bat inside, as long as you know what's the possible species, or sometimes you just know, you only know the genera or only know the family of the bats inside in the recording. It's fine. We take that, and we have this in our data sheet. We have the fields for people to feel. How did you record the sound? Did you record the sound on hand? Did you do that? Let the bat fly freely, or you do this inside the flight tent? And we have this self-evaluation field. Is how would you like to grade the quality of the recording? So it's very subjective, I know, but all this flexibility make people are more willing to share their data at the early stage. So I think, I don't know if this is useful for you, but for the area like Southeast Asia, if you want people conservative to open their mind, you need to encourage them. So we decide not to set up any standard, except you must have the bats in the recording. Yeah. That's all. That's the only. So indeed, we review some of the recording. Their quality are not so good, but just imagine is if some of these low quality recording, the bats belong to that recording represent the only specimen of that species in the world. Yeah. And that still gives us a little bit of opportunity to understand the echolocation code of the species. So in the future, for right now, we don't have any plan to make the standard higher. We still think we don't have enough recordings in the database. We have, even for CF bats, a lot of species only have 1 or 2 recordings. So at this stage, we try to collect more. And I don't know what's happening in the future. Yeah. Right.
No, that's a really good idea. And actually, I think it also gives us all a lot more confidence in submitting our calls as well. So that's great. So we have a question saying, do you have any data on the distribution of bats for West Africa? I'm not sure. Do you mean through acoustics? I think that is Noel who'd asked that. So I don't know if you want to elaborate, Noel, or
do I have data of, sorry that the signal was stable. Do I have data of the distribution of the recordings, or do I have
yeah,
the
I think
data?
so. I think Noel is asking if you have the distribution of bats for West Africa, but I don't think, yeah.
I think if you go to the code library, you click the sound recording from West Africa. In the metadata page, you can see the coordinates and also the site information. All these georeference fields are required. As long as they are available, we push people to put this information in the metadata sheet. So I guess we should have those information, at least the site information. But in general, I think more than 50% of the recording will have a coordinates attached to every individual recording. I think maybe like 70% of the recording have coordinates.
Yeah. Great. Oh, that's fantastic. And it's this is amazing chat. And Moira was asking, she said, this is really so interesting. And not being a scientific researcher, I did not realize how complicated the detail of the data would be and how accurate that would be. So that's more of a comment. So David is asking, if I have a passive acoustic data for a region, I don't know or cannot know the actual species, would that still be interesting for the Cairo Fox project?
We are taking that kind of data right now. We are doing that now. So we have the people from Colombia. He had this kind of data he collected in the past 40 years. He approached us. I think his first name is Bruce, and he's working on WCS Colombia, and he approached us, and we have a discussion, and we decide to take that kind of data for this moment. I think some people concern the quality of this type of reference code, but we think first it's better than nothing, and second is eventually we'll be able to probably will have a opportunity to figure out some species in the recording, and this is the most particular true for the old world where you have a lot of Hippociders and Rhinolophus. That's even you don't know, even the person who collect the recording, you don't know the species, but some people may be able to do that for you. So for the next version of Cairo-Vox the Hungarian friends, they are working on the second version of Cairo-Vox. We are going to add a lot of new function to the website, including the user registration system, the real-time maps, and also replaying the sound with a sonogram, as well as we're also talking about if it's not too difficult, we'll try to also set our system that let people to tag the recording. So it's possible, but we don't know if we can do that by this year. We also looking for funding to make workshops in the future to encourage people say you can download recording, those recording without known species, and try to help us to identify species in some of the recordings. So yes, we are taking that type of recordings. If you are interested to work with us, I'm happy to keep in touch with you.
Excellent, that's brilliant. So Moira just said, you know, we live in such a diverse world, isn't that wonderful? So it makes it so interesting. I would just like to say, if anybody, you know, all of you attending have any calls, it would be great if we could get more calls to this library for the benefit of all of us globally. And the more we're learning, the more we can kind of, you know, help each other out in different regions. Certainly if anybody is from Africa, we'd really encourage you to please send in, because it's acoustics is a huge gap in our knowledge right across Africa, and actually a lot of regions around the world too. So, and we've got lots and lots to learn, I think, from especially Southeast Asian kind of incredible network, and a lot of work that they're doing on acoustics and other kind of conservation and ecology research. So we don't have any other questions. I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank you very much, Joe, for your time. And I mean, this is an incredible amount of work, and I have no doubt it's just going to get lots and lots of momentum and just build and be a fantastic resource for everybody. So thank you very much for your time today. Much appreciated.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Okay, bye.
Bye.